All right, so I got a couple of subscriber questions that I'd like to toss at you if you don't mind. These got to be
Okay,
the best
perfect.
part of the show, right? So
There you
this
go.
first one is from Medrog, and actually we kind of accidentally went over it a little bit earlier, but his question was, could you ask if John ever inked anyone that made his job extremely difficult? No names necessary, but what happened and how did it turn out?
Well, as I discussed, there are times that you're on a book and it may not be, uh, you know, circumstances may change. Usually, when I got on a book as an inker, I a couple things would happen. I would either headhunt pencilers that I enjoyed, so I kind of knew what could be done, and
Yep.
I liked their work, or I was headhunted as an inker by pencilers, so it was kind of the best of both worlds. Is I may get a call from an editor saying like, "Hey, so and so wants to know if you'd be interested." And it may just be a mini series or something. We've got this opening. Would you like to ink it? And so that would give me the opportunity to, most of the people, like nowadays, if you gave me a name, I may not be familiar with the artist, but back when I was really working um, consistently in comics, uh, I knew most of the guys or girls that were out there, and I could give a definite like, yeah, I would really enjoy that, or I'm not sure. Can I get back to you? So there was, there was never on purpose. There was never anybody that maybe caused that bit of stress or grief or regret on my part, but I can't lie and say that there were not people who, after I did the job, I was like, okay, didn't like the way it turned out, whether it was because of the
Hmm.
pencils, because of the inks, because of what we did together. I didn't feel it meshed right. So um, I just kind of, made a mental note that I, I'm not interested in inking that person again. And that's no
Yeah.
offense to anybody. I don't want to sound, like I'm coming off as a negative person. It just happens. There's times that when you work with somebody, you have a connection and things have a flow to it. And then there's other times where it's like, you know, sandpaper on your forehead or something. It just does not work out. It doesn't feel good. And, I mean, I would just, like I said, I would make a mental note that not interested if that's offered again.
Yeah, I mean, you have two great chefs who have a completely
Right.
different outlook on how they want a plate to figure out. So when they get
Hmm.
together and work on it, it tastes awful. So it doesn't make them less of a chef. It just they have their own ideas about
Right.
things, and maybe they work better with somebody else. So maybe they shouldn't work on the same menu
Well,
piece. You know?
and like I say, it may have been, maybe the person whose pencils I inked, maybe they loved it,
Hmm.
but maybe for me, it was not the experience that I wanted. It didn't satisfy um, my inner inker. So it's like, I would just, like I said, make a note if this person's ever offered on a job again, I don't want to, I would take a pass on
Turn it
it.
down gracefully, right? So
Right. Yeah. I'm busy now, or, I wish I could, but I can't.
so this
Got to be careful with those answers, though. You got to make it definite that, that I don't have time now, because there were a few times I was like, well, hey, we got time on this. We could push it
It's
back
like
a little bit
no,
if that would give you
you
more
called
time.
my bluff.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next question I have comes from the wilds of Canada, from one of my favorite subscribers, 64-page special. And his question is kind of in two parts. His first one is, can you ask Mr. Beatty if he was ever in on a John Buscema chalk talk?
No, I wasn't. That's a big regret of mine. I would have loved to have. I never even met Big John. Um, but man, that guy could draw, couldn't
Yeah.
he? I mean, uh, sometimes it's like if you've ever seen the back of his original pages, the warm up studies and sketches that he would do on those. Uh, Sometimes he would ink them or half ink them or something, but it just, some of the back of the pages are beautiful, but his figure work and just his staging and character acting was so good, you know. What can I tell you? I never even, I never had a chance to inking that may have been for the best. Uh, there are certain people that, I think I would have liked to ink him. And then I'm like, it's probably better that I didn't.
Actually, it kind of segues into the second part of the question is if you didn't actually were ever part of those chalk talks, did Shooter ever gather inkers together to explain his ideas on how inking should work?
Yes, he did. I thought I was going to escape that actually. I was up there at a time when other inkers had told me, because I usually when I would go stay with Mike, I would stay 4 to 6 weeks, once in the summer, once in the winter, and that would give me a chance to go into Marvel, into DC, and to, hang out with Mike. And I actually, that's how some of the cover assignments, like that Chuck Norris cover that Mike and I did. The editor called up, said, "Hey, we're doing a Chuck Norris book." It was about the time, I guess, his animated series was coming
Yeah.
out. And, so I was there, and Mike said, "Hey, Beatty's up here with me. Do you just want us to bring it in finished?" And it was such a cool thing that's all he had to do was let the editor that was calling him know that I was there, and that he didn't have to look for an inker. He could, we could just bring it in finished, like at the end of the week or the next week or whenever they needed it. And, I would say 9 times out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, it was always like, "Oh yeah, sure. That'd be great." Because it makes their job easier.
Hmm.
And so we did quite a bit of things that happened that way. But uh, I kind of went off, and now can you refresh my memory on that question?
Oh,
Because
well, you just asked if Shooter ever gathered his inkers together to explain his
oh,
ideas on
that's right.
inking and how it should look.
Yeah. So I was up at Mike's, and I had a few people uh, start mentioning to me, "Has Jim called you into his office yet?" And I'm like, "For what?" "Oh, he's going to give you his lecture on inking." And I'm like, "What lecture?" And they're like, "Well, he's, and this was then, Jim and I, it's a whole different relationship now. Uh, uh, this is when Jim kind of, and granted, Jim has really good ideas on a lot of how comics should work, because he's been writing comics since he was like 13. So he really does know what makes comics work. I think there was an interview or an essay with him on some website, like in the past year or two, on the state of the industry today, and it was very spot on. But yeah, so I avoided it the whole time I was up there, and I think I was flying out. Whatever it was, I went in one last time to Marvel uh, before my trip home. I think I was in on a Thursday or Friday at Marvel, and I was leaving sometime the next week. Maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. I was going to fly out, so I wanted to go in one last time, and I didn't want to make it like, you know, um, so close to when I was leaving.
Hmm.
Although sometimes, if I had a later flight, Mike and I would, Mike would take me in. We'd go to Marvel, and then he'd drop me off at the airport, and I'd be on my way home. But so that last time, I'm actually going to leave Marvel, and it was after lunchtime, uh, so I was on my way out the door and down the long corridor, and from behind me I hear Mr. Beatty.
Got a bad feeling about this.
In Jim's voice, and I kind of stopped in my tracks, and he goes, "Can I see you in my office in 10 minutes?"
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
And I was like, I was on my way out, Jim. He goes, "No, I really need to talk to you just for a little bit." And I was like, "Okay." So I kind of knew what was happening, what was going to happen, and yeah. So he sat me down and gave me the lecture, and I adhered to it for the first few issues that I did, and actually, my good friend Mike Carlin, editor, and my older brother Mike Zeck, when the job was done by me, they were so kind to take. It was an issue of Captain America over Paul Neary when I had just got back on the book. It was the first issue I did. Don't remember the number. They were kind enough to give it to Jim so that he could see if my inking passed muster. And surprisingly, I actually remember this. I recall this because they gave me a phone call. Zach gave me a phone call from Carlin's office, and they actually told me, "Hey, we just took your job and showed it to Jim so that he could critique it." And of course, I'm like, "Oh, great, thank you guys." But that's the kind of stuff we'd do to have fun. We'd kind of fool around with each other, but they literally did it. And surprisingly enough, from what they told me, Shooter said, "Beatty understands what I'm talking about. This is how a comic book should be inked.
I'm your huckleberry.
Everybody should look at this and take note that he followed my instructions."
But the cream will rise to the top. Oh, yeah.
Well, that had to be one, right?
So, boy, you talk about, they had me in the hot box, right? And there's no need to call attention to my job after Jim gives me the lecture. Just, let it go. But no, they dish it right to him, Hey, Jim, look what John just, it's the whole issue. Look through it. What do you think? Did he follow what you told him? Jim said, yeah.
Praise from Caesar, right? So
there you go. Hey,
You were the chosen one.
So let's get into everyone's favorite subject, money. Let's talk just a little bit.
Okay.
We don't need specifics, but was working in comics like a really lucrative occupation for you? I mean, was it more of were you able to put money away because of it, or was it more of a paycheck to paycheck kind of existence? Can you just give us a little bit of insight on that?
In the beginning, like I said, my beginning rate was $32 a page at Marvel, and my $27.50 at DC. So now that's when I was like 19 years old, and it seemed like every year at Marvel, that was one really nice thing about Jim Shooter, is he realized that his artists needed raises. So you wouldn't even have to ask, but at least every year you would get a $5 a page bump, which sometimes you would get it twice a year. If Jim felt that you were really improving and working hard and stuff, he kept track of that, and you would get a letter from Marvel stating that, on your next job or whatever, you can now voucher at this rate. And that was nice. As far as money, no. For me, now I'm not saying I didn't make money, but I never made like the hundreds of thousands that some people did royalty wise, or even millions. But I never was one that saved money. I'm still not. I still haven't got that ingrained in my head. So, and money seems to like run through my fingers like water. I remember the one year that I got royalty checks for Return to Big Nothing, the Punisher graphic novel, first 5 issues of Legends of the Dark Knight and stuff. I was living on royalty money. It was a good royalty. I didn't, if I didn't want to do work, I didn't have to. And actually, it's interesting because I was offered Thanos Quest that year that I was getting all these like nice checks, and I had to think a long time about Thanos Quest because it was going to be 2 48-page prestige books, and this is when Marvel was doing the bigger paper, and I almost said no to it. And then I got to thinking about how much I remember when I was younger picking up Captain Marvel by Starlin, and how much I liked what he had done, and he was writing it and Ron Lim was penciling it. And so I said yes to it. And interestingly enough, Thanos Quest now has, put more money in my pocket due to the movie tie-ins.
It's nice to have a tertiary income coming in on something you already got paid for a long time ago,
Right. It has not been life-changing money or even weekly changing money. But it's there. It's like something I almost said no to, and I did it. And now, I'm trying to remember, that was probably around 1989, 88, late 88, early 89 when I did it. And so, that's the interesting thing is I started getting more issues of Thanos Quest at conventions for me to sign. And I was like confused, because I would see it from time to time, but people would be coming up, getting them graded and stuff. And I'm like, I finally asked one guy, I said, I got to ask you, what's up with this book? And they're like, oh, you didn't see whatever movie it was where Thanos made the turnaround smile or whatever.
Post credits, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, no. And they're like, oh, Thanos is the next big villain, coming up in the movies. And I went, now it makes sense.
Speculation is born again. We've come full circle.
So, for what it's worth, it was a good decision that I finally said yes, and it took me a while. I mean, I sat on it for a couple of days before I said yeah, because I was like, I really don't need to work. I'm getting all this royalty money in. And I spent the royalty money too. One of my first purchases was a 1990 Harley Davidson Fat Boy.
Nice buy, though. Their first year of them, around there.
Yes, it was. There was 10 grand plus. Just like
I have a Harley. You don't have to tell me. Yeah, but
well,
just
I had to tell mine. Taxes caught up with me, and I needed to pay those, and so I had to sell the Harley to pay the taxes. Luckily, they save their value. They hold their value. They hold their value. They certainly do. So I had paid 10 grand for the bike. I put about another, say, 3,500 into accessories and the leather saddlebags that were specifically made for that bike. They matched the other leather work and stuff. And so when I sold it, I got 10K back out of it. And I figured the 3,500 that I had invested in accessories, I had got that much enjoyment out of it.
Just appreciation. So, just think of it like that. So
right. Yeah.
We talked about a couple of your iconic covers earlier. I'd like to just run a few of them past you
Mhm.
real quick and just give me your
Okay.
thoughts on them real quick. And
Mhm.
first one, we already kind of saw this one, but this is one of my favorite covers that y'all collabed on.
Yep, and you're not alone in that. That Mike actually has a nice print of that one um, that he'll bring to a convention, and it's one of his good selling
Yeah,
prints.
it's
People
amazing.
people have a love for the Deathlock, man. It's like when that cover came out, and this is what I really miss about, and maybe they still do it. I don't know. What I miss about having the comic shop when they first started. Marvel made posters out of that. They had a black and white one, and
Hmm.
I think they had a color one for the retailers to put in their windows. Just for that one issue. And I think maybe they knew that it was going to be a good selling cover, so they made this promotional poster for it. I don't see that much anymore. If I don't know. I don't get to many comic
Yeah,
shops.
it's hard to argue with it. I mean, it's just so incredible.
Yeah,
All aspects of this, from inks,
right.
colors, and pencils. It's so incredible from through and through. That's why I did a whole video on it a while back. Link down below somewhere, probably. I know you've seen this one a time or two before.
Yep,
So yeah, might be one of the most iconic
yep.
comic book covers of all time, and it actually has your name on there. So any thoughts you want to throw out there about this one?
That is the one that at any convention Mike and I are at, or Mike or I are at, or even Jim. That's the most. We sign that book. Like that's the one. Like if you counted whatever books we signed, Secret Wars 8 will be the number one book that people bring to have us sign.
Oh man, well, like I said, it's become iconic, and not just for the art itself, but for what it means to the storylines and all
Right.
that. And
And that cover there has also been like, I mean, I think somebody had a website that had all the different uh, homages
hmm
to it,
oh, cover swipes,
so
yeah, lots of those, right?
yeah, where they use that as the layout and they'll have another character or something. So yeah, it's definitely it's got its following just for the cover alone.
So this next one kind of came up by accident, and I showed it to you because I
Mhm.
had it in my collection, but you had a cool story about it, so if you can just really regale us with it real quick.
Yeah, that was just a piece I was doing for myself. Just I wanted to do something that realistically wasn't for sale, just a piece of artwork that was mine. And I did that one. And have you seen the one where it was actually used as a pinup, not a cover? The Punisher's in a back alleyway, and he's got my Harley Davidson. I used it for reference, and he's got like two guns. His backs. He's kind of looking over his
Probably because
shoulder.
they used to add a lot of those into the Punisher comics back then. They'd have like two or three splash pages of it toward the back.
Yeah, and I did those two, and I showed them to Michael Golden, and he said, "Oh, are you selling these to Marvel?" And I said, "Well, I didn't think about it. I just did them." He goes, "I think I gave him copies or something." He goes, "Let me have them. I'm gonna show them to the editor." And I think is that book? Can you open that? Was Don Daly the editor
Let's
at the
see
time?
here. Oh, I can open this one. This is one of the ones that got ruined. Yep, Don Daly.
Yeah. So he took them into Don Daly, and he basically told Don, he showed him, these two pieces that I did, and he said, "I think you should buy these from John Beatty." And Don called me up and said, "Hey, you got two Punisher pieces that Michael Golden showed me, and I'd like to buy them for publication." So they wound up getting printed when they were just pieces that I did for fun.
What?
Just like after hours, I would spend 30 minutes or an hour in the evening working on something that was strictly just for me, just to do whatever I wanted to do and not have anybody leaning on me or no pressure. If I didn't finish them, they didn't get done, whatever. So
don't you love just when you get accidental work like that? Isn't it great?
Yeah, it was nice that they actually did wind up getting published. Like I said, my intent was really just for fun. And while I'm on that subject, I will say that this year I do want to do some more personal work, like just pieces that I just want to do for fun. If I sell them at some time or whatever, that's fine. But I just want to get back to that, producing work just because I feel like it, that really, it's nice to do commission work, and my commission list is open now. So, if somebody would like to commission me, get in touch, put my information below, whatever, my contact. Yep. And, but, the more I think about it, the more I want to start again, creating artwork just for my own, like ease my mind, just like do what I want and not be so much of an order taker. It's like if I want to do a character that I want to in a style that people aren't used to seeing me work in, then that's up to me,
Yeah, if they buys it, that's on them or whatever. I got something I have to look at myself, right? So.
Right. And it gives me that chance to experiment with different styles if I choose to also. That's one interesting thing about commissions is sometimes I'll get a commission and I'll have this idea in my head for something that, I know, people have a way of, they see your published work, which I call your commercial style. And so they expect a certain, they expect a certain thing from you. But as an artist, I'm constantly looking at other influences and absorbing stuff and wanting to try different things. So personal work is great for that because you can do what you want. And it's, you're not trying to please the person that buys the commission. Like those two pieces, they were just for me. And so I want to get back to that, at least, one nice piece a month or something, half hour here, hour there, if I can grab that time and just produce something that, that I can have fun with.
Well, I can't think of a better way to work on something you enjoy, then maybe it sells too. So it's a great thing. And I guess the last one we have here is what's to me probably the most iconic cover of any comic of all time. I'm sure a lot of people would probably agree with me, but The Return to Big Nothing, the whole book is amazing by itself. I've done a video on this one as well. But any thoughts on this one?
The story was really good. I think someone on Twitter about a few weeks back, maybe a month back, had mentioned, like the end page where the Punisher's talking about they laugh at the law or something, but they don't.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's like it was such a great story, And the interesting thing about that cover, to me, besides, it's a beautiful painting of the Punisher, but the box around with the Punisher type slanted, it just like design wise, that really bothers my eye. Because I would almost think that, they could have just tipped they don't need the white box and maybe made it that blue color or made it the white, but it just right now it almost looks, whenever I see that from a distance, it looks like it's a little like Post-it with a price on it or something.
Maybe they forgot to put it on there originally and they just added it right before printing or something.
Well, that could be, I don't know, but it really does. It's from all purposes, there you go. And the great thing about that graphic novel is that was for the Epic line of comics, which was a kind of a different, of course, it was done through Marvel, but it was kind of a separate entity. And Archie Goodwin was the editor, and he really allowed us the time to, do the job and do as good a work as we could. So there was that was probably in one sense it was a high pressure job, but in another sense it was low pressure, in that if I didn't get a page done in a day, I didn't have to feel like I'm going to miss a deadline, because there literally was not a deadline. So if I had a bad day, if things just weren't working out, if I wasn't in the zone, I didn't have to force myself to, work on something that wasn't coming naturally. It wasn't, if I never got in that flow or whatever, it's like I could just put it aside and not worry about it. I could pick it up either later that day. I could wait till the next, the next day or something like that to work on it, and not stress about, oh, I didn't get a page day done today. I'm going to have to do 2 or 3 somewhere else down the line so I can so I won't miss the deadline on it. So that was probably the only experience in my career where I actually had that time where there was really no extreme pressure. I think during that time that Mike and I were doing that, we were also, that's when we could fit other covers in, because, he had the same deal. If he could fit a cover in and skip a day of drawing a page, then he could do that and draw a cover instead.
Well, it all came together very well, obviously. So it was a big seller.
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
Great book.
No, definitely.
Everything from story to art is just incredible in this book. It's one of my favorite of all time.
Right.
So it's nice when an artist gets time to flex their creative muscles a little bit and not be constrained by the deadline.
The royalties from that book are what bought my Harley.
It was well earned and well deserved.
And I wish I would have put some in the bank, but nobody could tell me back when I was 29 years old that I was going to live to be as old as I am now, which is currently 58. So, when you're 29, that's getting close to 30. But anyway, when you're in comics and you're 29 and you're on top of the world, or it seems like you're on top of the world, you're doing what you want to do. You're having a good time. You're getting a royalty check. You can go out and buy a Harley Davidson with cash. It's never going to end. And then when it does end, you're back to grinding it out, But for me, it's almost a necessity. I think if I could not have stress or worry about survival, I think I would be too lazy.
Every great artist needs a deadline, right?
There is some truth in that, I believe. I mean, I think that it's very few people still are as creative, I think, if they're not hungry for something. And that goes for me. It goes for also improving my craft. I still every year I try to make a commitment to get better. And I don't ever see myself just stopping. I think I'll be stopped eventually, but I don't see myself just going even if I hit the lottery, I think I would still draw.